Hi folks, welcome to a Retro Journal. Today I wanted to talk about my graphical user interface for the QL. I use it a lot and I've had a few questions about it. So I think I've noted before that it was created a year after the QL, so in 1985. And it was, I think, the first graphical interface for the QL. It came with a manual, as well as it came on a cartridge like this. So it's just a small ROM cartridge. It has a just a small EPROM chip in there, and I can actually I have spare ones where I can actually program if I want to. I think on this one I have Toolkit 2 in there, but which is a nice extension to the QL's QDOS operating system. But ICE sort of does some of those things as well, and I wanted to demonstrate ICE to you guys today. I just finally found and ordered a mouse version of ICE called MICE. So ICE stands for Icon Controlled Environment, and then mouse is the mouse icon controlled environment. And I'm excited to finally get that, because I've always wanted one, although I've read that one of the things that it doesn't support is the keyboard interface. So the way I use ICE is I use the space bar. So I use the keys to move the mouse, and then I can use the space bar to select. And with the mouse version of ICE, that actually no longer works. So you actually have to use the mouse for everything. So that actually is not as appealing. So I probably will use the mice version when I actually need a mouse. And that might be a silly thing to say, considering that graphical environments are all about using mice. But it turns out that the way ICE was designed, actually, and I just realized this the other day, it's actually sort of based on what modern machines do now, which is a trackpad. And with a trackpad, you kind of move the mouse around, and then you use your thumb to select. And so that's kind of how I work with, if I want to do this and I use this to select, it kind of has that same feel. And for me, trackpads have a certain use, but they don't substitute for mice. Like, for instance, if I need to drag something or resize something, that's when I really struggle with a trackpad of hitting the button and moving some people are really good at it, but I really need a mouse for that. And I think the reason that ICE works so well with keyboard and arrow key movement is because it only offers selection of elements. It doesn't allow you to drag icons. It doesn't allow you to resize them. Now, there's a few instances where here a mouse might come in handy, because I don't think the keys for the number stuff doesn't work. So the calculator is a little useless in terms of using let's do multiplication. Using using a cursor key, it kind of works, but a mouse here would be better. But that's really one of the few use cases where that actually makes sense. In other instances, since generally the way you use ICE is you use it to select things, and then you could copy it to, then choose a different, like maybe I want to copy this to a floppy. I would select this, and it would say 3 files selected. Do you wish to copy this data? And then, of course, at that point, I would have to have a floppy connected, and I'm going to say cancel, but it would copy it in that order. So it's very useful. And the few instances of maybe the date and the calc app, it might become useful. Now, certainly, there's also I can escape out of this. And let's say if I want to select the Elite program, which is a basic program. And now I'm going to actually reposition the camera here in a little bit and put this in monochrome mode so that you can see the full menu at the bottom. So things are getting cut off here because this is in TV mode in the US. And so I've learned to know where that is, and so this will tell you what the size of it is, etc. But again, it's mostly point and click, and doesn't require dragging. So therefore, using the this almost as a trackpad really works. And you know, if you think about it, like I have my Mac here. Let's see if I can put this in the screen. And you can see here, it's the same thing. When I use this, I click on that and I move that. So it has that same ergonomic feel. And you know, ICE was actually it was my first real use of a graphical interface back in the late 80s, early 90s. Now, when I was in school, I was in shared a suite with 3 other students, and one of our suite mates had an Amiga 1000, but the Amiga 1000, I don't ever remember seeing Workbench. I think because he only had a single disk drive. We would boot up to the Kickstart ROM, and then we would put a disk in, and it would load a game or a word processor, but maybe saw the blue Workbench window, but we never actually were in Workbench. At least I don't remember that. And I think that was part of the problem with things like the Amiga 1000 and also the Macintosh 128, which years later I got to play with. It was painful to use with a single floppy drive because it would take a lot of time to load the OS and move things around. It would hit the disk all the time. Because on the QL, the micro cartridges are much slower. Are much slower. You know, they designed the operating system and also the graphical user interface to not use it very much. If I boot the QL up without anything on it, it's 120K memory, 32 of it which is used by the screen, so at least 96, and there's another 12K of system variables. You get about 11K. You get about 85K available for programming and use. ICE takes up an additional K, so you only get 48K available. So that's really efficient in terms of it's in a 16K ROM cartridge, and then it takes an additional 1K of system variables, and it's not. You can't think of it as a graphical user interface because once you start something up, it just disappears. It's really more of a graphical file manager, and it really works well in that. And I think in terms of efficiently, again, if you put it in the context of 1985, with what you had with the Mac and even the Amiga, this was a really pleasant experience to run. I don't know much about the Atari ST and GEM. This looks a little bit more like GEM, but again, no resizable windows. It does have pull-up menus, and I'll show you that when I put it in monochrome mode. But for the most part, it really was designed well as a simple file manager that could use keyboard and the space bar as a button and your arrow keys. So it really had that ergonomic feel of a trackpad. Now again, I'll get the mice version, and I want to try that out, see if it's something I could live with without having this, but I would really only be using it for, starting things up. So I'd use a mouse for that, and then I would go away from it. So I probably will stick with the ICE version because it's such a minimal system. But I will say that even modern operating graphical interfaces, there's some that I like and there's some that I don't. I think my favorite all-time graphical interface was System 7.5. I got the book for it right here. And if you saw on my channel, I recently, this past year, bought a PowerBook 180, and that's actually running System 7.5. And it's one of my favorite operating systems. In fact, 1992, things were actually not that primitive because the 1992 System 7.5 is a pretty nice operating system. And again, this one, 1985, but I used it 89, 90. Was my first real experience with it, and what I really like about it is that it shows icons for every file, so it doesn't hide them like the original Workbench on Amiga and even Windows 1 did. And in Windows 1, I mean, if you've seen videos on how painful it is to actually install and get running, and it really doesn't even give you that many icons. It really just gives you sort of a fancy command shell, list of files kind of thing. This does a much nicer job, and this file right here doesn't have an extension, but it still knows that it's an executable. So, and same with this. So it is able to add information that otherwise you don't have. Now, it does also allow you to see how much memory you have. And again, I've learned where this is just by, sometimes I miss it. Yeah, so here, right now it's running 2 jobs. It says 70K free, but that's only because when this is open, but as soon as you leave that and you check for memory, memory actually gets reduced down to you have about 84K free. So I don't know where those 12K is being used presently when you're in the environment. But you can load any program that you could load from the command shell. It definitely disappears pretty quickly when you run something. So ICE is a pretty handy interface. It's kind of stays out of the way of the QL, but allows you to get a nice visual environment. It lets you rename files. I think that's... I forget where it is. I don't use it as much. It might be... I kind of remember sort of generally where it is. Yeah, that's you can display stuff to screen now. So you can display what's on there to screen. Yeah, I think the rename function is again. I'm going to put this on. I think the rename function is literally over here, from what I recall. Oh, can't get to it. No. So you can rename stuff. So there's stuff that you can do that you could do in Toolkit 2 that you can't do in regular QDOS. So the one thing it has missing is the jobs functionality to kill a job. So I wish it would have that. But other than that, and of course it gives you the current time, and I have a battery back clock in there, so that works well. But yeah, so my first graphical interface, and I just wanted to showcase it a little bit. Now, again, it's not the current state of the art on the QL. We have the pointer environment, which came out, I think, in the in the 90s at one point, and has really transformed the QL. So modern QLs will use that. You saw videos on my Q68, and it has many different sort of, it has multiple environments, just similar to how Linux has different, graphical environments that you can run on. So the point environment is really just the base of it, giving you libraries and whatnot. I don't think ICE has that. I know there's an ICE toolkit. I don't really know what it does. And now you could say, like, well, that's a huge, failure on ICE. But I mean, ICE was made in 1985, and by that time, early 86. I mean, in 86, the Sinclair Research was sold, and Amstrad killed the QL. So there wasn't much time for them to develop sort of a graphical environment where they could give you an interface so that other programs could be written for that. Now, Idersoft, the company that made ICE, did write some programs for ICE. I don't know how well they're integrated. I haven't used ArtICE, which uses it needs the ICE ROM to run, but it didn't really use the mouse. But there's also a mouse version of Artist, so something I'll explore in the future. But if they have had the opportunity to extend this, and if there were more models of the QL, maybe ICE would have been the killer graphical app that could have competed with Windows and the Mac OS and Amiga's Workbench. But that's all we got. We got one iteration, and so I always like to put it in the context of 1985, and it was pretty good in terms of memory usage, not hitting the disk or the micro drives at all, and being really handy and useful at the time. Especially when, if you think about it, 1985, there were, a lot of folks were making graphical user interfaces because of the Macintosh, but this was all new to us, and so this would have been pretty phenomenal. All right, I'm going to resituate the camera and put this in monochrome mode. And the reason why is I get full screen in monochrome mode, and because this is high resolution, all you get in terms of colors, and you see them all right now: green, white, black, and red. And so the green is going to turn into gray, the red is going to turn into a shade of gray. Otherwise, you don't really lose much. I should get a RGB to HDMI adapter for my SCART cable so I could get a full screen, but just haven't had the need for it, and I've got other things going on. And I kind of like to reminisce on how I used the QL back on an old TV. So, in fact, I used it on a black and white TV, so putting it in monochrome is even more closely related to how I used it. But I will show you some of the features of ICE. Just because I've shown it enough, and folks have asked, like, well, what can ICE do? All right, so let me resituate the camera and do that. Here we are. We have a nice screen, and so this really shows off. Again, it's grayscale, but it really the monochrome composite is just so crystal clear. And here you can see finally that what you get in the missing menu is the stuff on the bottom, and that you're also cutting off this. So again, if I select this, I can hit so I was a little off on the rename, right? So I can hit the rename and then decide to rename it if I want. If I don't want to rename it, I can just keep the same name. It lets me view things. So let's use Klingon Bass as an example. And I can view files to the printer, to the screen, or you showing you to the printer, to the screen. I can customize my environment. I can set the time, change devices, so that, for instance, maybe I don't want MD. So MDV could be, instead of microdrives, it could be something else. I could change that to floppy if I wanted. So the devices you see on the bottom, you have MDV, Win for Winchester, hard disk, and RAM, but I can change that if I want. I can define my printers, set my controls, so how fast the mouse is being, the double clicks on the mouse. I can go on the controls here just to see it. Repeat delay, repeat rate, pointer speed, click length. Yeah, so it has all these things. I can save and load those changes. I could change I can also change the background. Set time, date, change device. So did it actually ask it here? Repeat delay, repeat. No, but there's a place to change the background, so you don't have to have green. You can create a new stipple pattern. I just don't see it in here. Set time. Backup just basically backs up an entire disk, but I prefer to actually choose and select the order of which I want these files to be, and that really helps in organizing my data. Info, again, I've chosen that. Just tells you, how big the file is, and then you can format and you can quit, and quit will just take you out of ICE. Escape basically unselects it, and then bin, basically you select the files you want and you hit the trash bin. Again, you don't drag them, you just click the bin, and that will that will just delete them. So it's more of a select and then action as opposed to drag and drop. You can one thing you don't see when I use it in TV mode is when I click this, you can see that it changes and it goes up to 8. Because that's showing how many devices there are on the and I think this also is true for floppy. You can go as high as you want, yeah. So up to 8 again. So you can have as many devices connected to your machine as you want. You can have multiple pages. So this one only has a single page, but if you have the QL is a flat file system, so there's no directory structure, at least on the basic QL. So if I click this, it would, if there's multiple pages on this, it would show those multiple pages. But I find, and again, I did show the system one, so this is where it, this tells you got 2 jobs running, 77K free. Again, now it's 77K free. There's usually about 84K free. So for whatever reason, when the graphical environment is actually running, it's taking up an additional 7K. But when it's sort of in the back, when you quit, leave it, or you start a program, you tend to get the full, almost the full memory. Now, when I do click a program, and it turns out that you actually lose ICE. So if I'm going to use ZXMash because it's small. Let's see if it runs. So this is a smash. I did a video on sort of a compressed version of ZX. I don't have my V drive, so I'm kind of relying on my, so it did work. So it kind of leaves and then runs. So this is my ZX simulator, and if I quit, it'll go back to ICE. But what it won't do is, so it runs all these programs in what we call exec W, or basically not in multitasking mode. Oh, and for whatever reason, my time has been reset. So I should actually set that. If you reset the time too much, or reboot it too much, sometimes it loses, it'll reset its time. It's a bug in the system. But let me reset, now that I can do this, let me reset the time and the date. So that would be custom. and then you go under set time. And we are in year 2022. There are things in here that would be more convenient. The month is September. It's the 28th of September. Again, just use the up arrow keys. And the time is 14:57. I'm going to do 58. And wait till my watch kicks over to the next second, so that I get, yeah, so I think it's going to kick over now. There it is, kicked over, 0 seconds. And here we are, 2:58 p.m. on a Wednesday. So that's how you can set, there's a way to set the background. I don't know where it was. I thought it was, not set controls, change devices. So here's where you can change. I think if you do that, nothing changes. But there is a way to, I thought there was a way to change the background. Maybe you have to use a different program to change that, because there is some software that can come along with it. But yeah, so this is basically your graphical interface for the QL. Again, imagine this in color. It would be, the background would be green, and this thing up here would be red. So you just get different shades of gray and monochrome. Looks a lot like, you know, sort of what you would get on a monochrome Mac. You saw my recent videos on my PowerBook 180. But that's the graphical interface for the QL. It's very low overhead and works really well. Oh, I don't know why I didn't set my time. I usually run this in let's do it one more time. I usually run this in TV mode, so this is the first time I run it in monitor mode. I can't imagine that there should be anything wrong with this. The day is the 28th, and it's gonna be 2:59 now. And yeah, boom. Yeah, so now it works. So oh, that was weird that it oh, I think my keyboard is stuck. Let me okay, I've rebooted, and so the bug seems to be a bug actually in ICE itself. So when it's repeatable. When I create a directory listing, I go customs, change the date, and then go customs and hit cancel. It gets into some weird state. So I did power the computer down. I'll see if I can clean the connectors even more cleanly. I generally don't use it in TV mode, so therefore I don't really get that as often. In any case, well, the one last thing I wanted to show you was the date and time. Or the date calendar, right? So that allows you to sort of, and again, if you were in color, you would actually see that the 28 is red, and it's hard to see that. And then you can kind of go backwards and forwards to, but there's no appointments. There's nothing. You can't click up here and do anything. So it's really just a calendar. But yeah, so that's sort of the complete ICE interface for you, and I really like it. Again, I've just gotten used to having the bottom parts cut off, and I know where these things are generally, and that's one reason I never hit the error is because I think so I'll try it one more time. If I hit custom, and now if I hit cancel, I think this is where the error comes in. Nope. So I think you have to maybe do directory listing, then hit. So there's probably some memory conflict or something. Or it just could be that I need to thoroughly clean the connectors on that. But for the most part, I mean, it's been stable since I've used it, other than this weird error that just popped up. But yeah, I'm going to end here. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.